You ever sit down with a so-called classic book or some monstrous text that everyone says is so important, and yet 3 pages in, your mind feels like it's stuffed with the wet cement of blah, 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 blah? Well, here's something you might be missing. When a book feels impossible, that feeling part really matters because it's not your intelligence. What it is usually is it's that your working memory, and it's a very specific kind of memory, is being asked to do too many different kinds of work at once, levels of work. And once you understand what these different levels are, difficult books will stop pushing you away and you'll be able to diagnose which level is feeling hard, often in under a minute. That's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're tired of books hitting you with unfamiliar terms, well, that's one level that you have to start to understand. If it's abstract logic, that's another level. If it's an unfamiliar writing style or even just a style you don't like, your working memory is going to get used up. And when you have all of those things going on at once, your working memory can get crushed. Not because it's weak, but because it's doing vocabulary decoding, concept building, and parsing sentences all at the same time. So we can work on reducing cognitive load one little level at a time. And the key is that you don't push harder when you have these feelings. You need to change the order in which your brain meets the material. So let's talk about author's style first. I'm totally in love with the content in Doubt by Jennifer Hesht. Now, I don't know why exactly, but her style is, in my brain, just not that inviting. To me, it feels really hard, and it's got this historian vibe. So every time that I picked it up, I had to allow for some time to settle in. I literally never got used to her style. So you need to keep the challenge of author style in mind when you're reading. And part of the fix is just knowing that it's there and then giving yourself to start the engine every time. You know, I studied theater a lot when I was in university and did some acting. And one of the rules is that you don't want to have to turn the engine on over and over and over again. But when you're reading really thick books, that's literally what you have to do, is start the engine over and over and over again. So it's not always you. Sometimes it's the book, but it's also just the reality that different books have different sized engine keys that you need to turn, and sometimes it's just harder than other times. Now, there's the opposite problem to consider when it comes to style, and some books are like a water slide, and you just can't put them down. Kind of like Why Does the World Exist by Jim Holt here. I actually had to make myself take breaks to consider the content because for my tastes, Holt has really greased the pole of the material he's talking about. Well, that sounds a little awkward, doesn't it? Greasing the pole. I guess it's Frank Zappa's influence on me. I don't know if you know that song. Keep it greasy so it'll go down easy. Something like that. I think it's on Joe's Garage. The point is that racing through books just because they feel easy isn't always a solution either. Sometimes you have to watch for the illusion of learning and also use a technique that I'm going to share with you a little bit later today. But let's assume that we live in a world where no book ever feels as easy as this one feels to me. What do you do when your brain throws up a stop sign so that you aren't quitting too early, but also not suffering needlessly? Because let's face it, sometimes there are books that you should stop reading. But you don't want to get in the habit of just quitting books frequently. There are some reading gurus who say that life's too short for boring books and all of that. Well, unfortunately, some of the best information is in boring books, and you gotta be able to get through them. So instead of stopping, take a detour instead. Let me show you what I mean. It was years ago when I finally decided I am going to conquer Kant. I had understood basic aspects of his philosophy and read little bits and pieces here and there in graduate school. But very soon after starting a serious read of the Critique of Pure Reason, I realized I needed to take a step back and do 2 things. First, I needed to build a roadmap into Kant during what were pre-chatbot days. So back then, I searched Google in a very particular way. in a way that is still very useful. Rather than search a term like Intro to Kant, I entered a more tightened command, and the command is file type, PDF, syllabus, and then your keyword. So in this case, Kant. And I also did variations like metaphysics. Now, even though you can and should these days use more direct language in LLMs like Gemini or ChatGPT, they'll give you links to syllabi, and you can find the most authoritative professors who teach Kant, but I still suggest that you cross-reference what you can find on Google. Use both. While you're cross-referencing, you'll also come up with different keywords, and you can even ask for various words that will help you find different syllabi. And this is such an important thing because the syllabi of the world's most important universities is filled with some of the best recommendations from the best scholars. And, another little layer that you can add, still valuable to this day, is go and talk to an actual librarian in an actual library. Now, I'm a little bit biased towards libraries because I've worked in them and did a certificate at one point in library science. So I kind of understand the value of someone who's trained. I also worked for Mary Kanduik at York University when she was the head research librarian. So maybe it's a bit old school, but I've just been around some real pros who understand this stuff and trained with them and never got nearly as good as them, but some of the stuff that they can find will blow you away. And part of it is just the way that they think. So don't hesitate, even in our day and age, to go to a librarian. And by the way, even though the LLMs are super powerful and search engines have had their day and may get good again, the thing to understand is that not all information is scanned on the internet. And there's a lot of material that will actually be in books only to this day. So that's a key point when you're feeling overwhelmed, is that you may just simply be overwhelmed by the absence of a resource that you could have if you would just deal with things in a little bit of an old school way. Go to microfiche if you have to. All right, so no matter how you get these syllabi, I suggest that you select from them at least a core secondary piece of literature, a commentary from a reputable source, and ideally a biography or a historical book that will provide context about whatever it is that you're reading. Now, to make this concrete for you, one of the books that I found was The Evolution of Modern Metaphysics by Adrian Moore, and this is a really good find, and I selected it not only because it was highly recommended in syllabi, but also it's really thick. And so basically, the reason to get a thick book is because it also puts the historical context into place at the same time as giving an intro to Kant through the chapter in that book. So try to look for those books that are really authoritative and thorough. And in this way, what you've done is turned difficulty into a path forward, not an obstacle. Think about that. When you follow this suggestion from now on, you'll know that when books feel impossible, it isn't you, it isn't the book, it's the order in which your brain is being asked to do the work. And so, after reading The Evolution of Modern Metaphysics, Kant was much easier. And even if the book does feel easy, like some books will, you can still modify this process to make sure that you're reading some secondary literature or following up with something additional that actually is outside your comfort zone. Because you do want to actually find stop signs so that you can grow. There are difficulties that are indeed desirable, and many studies have shown the value of running into stop signs because they are difficult books that challenge you. Now, if this way of thinking about reading is useful to you, then you'll want to stay close to what's coming next, because this tutorial you're watching now is the first video in a new playlist all about building the mental tools required to read the world's most difficult books, the books that so many people sadly, tragically, unfortunately give up on, but not you. And not only that, you're going to be able to actually retain what you learn and have it accessible in your memory. So subscribe if you're new here and turn on notifications because each video in this playlist builds on the last. Miss one and you're gonna miss leverage. And if you want this series shaped around the books that you are wrestling with, leave a comment naming the books that have been defeating you. Dense philosophy, technical manuals, sacred texts, nothing's off limits. The goal here is very, very simple: to raise the standard of reading for all of us. And the more people who pitch in and commit to this goal of becoming better readers, well, here's the deal. More truly great books are going to get written in the future, and we're going to be able to understand them. Okay, so the other thing that I suggest that you do is, as you read, start creating your own glossary. Now, there's a very special strategy for glossary building using color-coded categories that I'll share in a future video of this playlist. But for now, the idea is to not just go look for books like a Kant dictionary or a glossary of philosophical terms, but to actually write out the words on index cards and develop your own little library and use some spaced repetition to get those terms into your long-term memory. Because one of the reasons why we have this short-term memory load over and over and over again, where we're just screaming with frustration, is because we just don't stop to get words mastered so that we never feel that again. Now, how exactly that you use memory techniques to memorize? Well, if you haven't seen it, check the description for free access to my mnemonics dictionary. More than just a reference, this is a tactical memory weapon. It's packed with powerful, field-tested mnemonic devices and links you out to dozens of tutorials. And it's going to take forgettable information and make you have it all stick in your mind. So whether you're grappling with Kant or chemistry, logic, or Latin, this dictionary helps you lock knowledge down fast and forever. And the best part is that it's 100% free. It's regularly updated and it's waiting for you in the description. But one simple thing is just to start writing down unfamiliar terms on cards. And that's what I did to build the mnemonics dictionary and everything that I've learned about memory science, because I practice what I preach. And I'm not too proud to admit that memory is even more of a challenging topic than Kant in my experience. I mean, there's just so much wild memory science words that I really am glad that I stopped to memorize as I went, because whether it's ekphory or the insular cortex, I mean, periaqueductal gray area of the brain, believe me, I have just been able to read so much faster and retain more because I slow down and stop and memorize those words. And I've read a ton of super boring stuff in the field of memory and learning, but I did not obey the stop sign. I just took detours and pushed through so that in the future I could look at these terms and understand what they meant and not have this cognitive overload that comes from having short-term and working memory crushed. So, make no mistake, top performers cannot afford to chase easy, because even when books are, dare I say it again, easy because they're greasy, you still have to stop and think about what they mean. So that's kind of like a contradiction. We don't want to stop and obey the stop signs, but we do want to stop. So it's stop signs all the way down at the end of the day. What I'm trying to get at in my slightly awkward way here is that you've got to stop to think, but you have to do so in a way that's systematic. So let me share one more simple system I've been using for years. When I finish a book, and I deliberately choose big books like this for this system, I choose a couple more books to read that I found in the bibliography, or what is sometimes called the works cited at the back. Now, this simple decision metric means that I never waste cognitive power thinking about what to read next, even though I do have to think a little bit about which books I'm going to choose. But what it does is it creates a much deeper connective webbing between books. Now, of course, I also read random books too, but even then, I try to build on them by figuring out what other books an author recommended. And this systematic way is a memory aid. It helps you remember more because you know the context surrounding the information. And this is a principle memory scientists call context-dependent memory. So, if you found this useful, there's another list of videos I've already completed, a playlist called How to Build Autodidactic Habits So You Can Teach Yourself Anything. And if you like that idea of just a simple habit of basically embedding every book you read by reading about 2 to 3 other books that are referenced either by the book itself or that you find in interviews with the author, you're going to love this playlist. You're going to discover lots of little habits. Habits from people like Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, and many more. Habits they use to teach themselves everything from anatomy to rhetoric, philosophy to physics, without having to need formal degrees or, in some cases, ever stepping foot inside of a classroom. So, thank you so much. Give that playlist a go along with the mnemonics dictionary I've shared with you so that you have many, many ways to tackle the different levels that create overwhelm and are at war with your short-term working memory. And until the next video in this playlist devoted to reading and conquering difficult books drops, let me know which books have twisted you in a tangle in the comments. And thank you again for watching. As I always like to say, until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic.